and welcome everyone to this week's Citizens Climate University. It's a weekly webinar program of Citizens Climate Lobbies that provides CCL supporters like you and I with access to in-depth training opportunities on topics relating to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'm your host, and tonight's topic is specifically campaign season activities. We're going to join CCL Government Affairs Coordinator Adeline DeYoung and Southeast Regional Director Addu for a training that walks through how we as nonpartisan organization have the opportunity to connect with individual candidates from both sides of the aisle on the issue of climate change during this season of electoral primary campaigns. We're going to be clear that we don't support or organize for individual candidates or political parties, but we still, as a volunteer network, play an essential role in providing insight to all candidates that we have the chance to reach out for, especially on the merits of our policy. So let me introduce Dawn and Adeline really quick, and then I'll pass it to them. Adeline works in our DC office as CCL's Government Affairs Coordinator. She focuses with her work on tracking and researching pertinent legislation, meeting with congressional offices and non-governmental organizations, and advocating for CCL's policy goals in DC. She's been with the organization since starting as an intern at the headquarters in CCL, California in January of 2015. We are so grateful to have you joining us tonight, Adeline. And with Adeline is Dawn. Addu is a native of North Carolina and has spent the last decade advocating for renewable energy and action on climate change, founding the very first CCL group in North Carolina way back in 2011, and is currently the Southeast Director, managing over 40 groups throughout the Carolinas, Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. Dawn's primary focus in all of that is really helping our volunteers with grassroots organizing, along with direct congressional lobbying on the federal level. So thank you as well for joining us, Dawn. And if we've done our job well, you're going to walk away with these three goals: more knowledge in how to work with incumbents to keep building out that support that's so essential with our relationships already in Congress, as well as gaining some more guidelines on how to reach out and engage with both Senate and House area candidates within your districts, and then the chance to really start thinking about some new activities to try out and others that we recommend really avoiding, especially for this cycle with your local outreach to candidates in campaign seasons. So to get us there, we're going to do a quick background, and then we're going to jump in with some advice from Dawn on working with incumbents. We'll pass it to Adeline to talk about some guidelines for the House and the Senate. We'll do some reminders on how we can stay nonpartisan and some recommendation on activities.
And before we jump into tonight's training, I think it's important to also acknowledge, we just found this out actually today, that the U.S. Capitol, both the House and Senate office buildings are going to be closed to the public for the rest of the month. This comes in response as Washington comes to try to help curb the spread of the coronavirus. And so along with that, Capitol tours, White House tours, and the rest of the Capitol are going to be restricted access to only House and Senate office members and staff starting on Friday, March 13th through the rest of the month at a minimum. And while both chambers are scheduled to go into recess next week, it's also fair to assume that many offices may be cautious about scheduling any kind of meetings or appointments with local constituents for the time being. One last thing to highlight before jumping into the specifics tonight is that while many of these offices may be closed for the time being to face-to-face meetings, many of them at the same time are also interested in scheduling virtual meetings. So whether you're comfortable using Zoom or another technology platform for video conferencing, we do recommend still trying to schedule meetings, but just having them be virtual if that is the office's preference. How to best make decisions for your district and relationship with your member's office.
So with that, the floor is yours, Dawn, and thank you again for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much, Brad. I appreciate that introduction, and appreciate y'all for being on the call tonight. So campaign season activities. So obviously things are a little different right now with the virus kind of expanding across the U.S. So campaigns are going to be adjusting to that just as we are. But nevertheless, this is a great opportunity for us to kind of address what we need to do in this environment. So we want to make sure that we're starting by remembering our appreciation and respect. Remember, that's our foundation. That's where we want to come from in everything. So Let me talk a little bit about our kind of top priority in terms of working with incumbents and building that support. We really want you to continue to work with your incumbent members of Congress as you have been. Even if they're retiring, we want to make sure that you're working with them so we can increase their support for the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Despite the considerable distractions of the election, they still represent you and vote on legislation through the end of the year, including the lame duck sessions after the election. So they need to be hearing from constituents, and especially new voices from different demographics in your district based on your research and understanding of who your member of Congress trusts. So again, we're going to trust you. You know your member of Congress better than anybody else. So what's going to make the best difference and how do you want to engage them? That's where we really want to focus. So even if your member of Congress is retiring, don't despair. Keep doing the work that you're doing. In addition to that, we know that the staffers of members of Congress who do leave Congress, those staffers stick around and they move around to other offices. So it's often, and I've seen it happen, where we've had staffers with one member of Congress where we've got a really good relationship. That member of Congress leaves. That staffer goes to a member of Congress where maybe we don't have a great relationship, and suddenly that we've got an expert with the Energy Innovation Act with that member of Congress. So don't despair. Keep doing what you're doing. Candidate events also offer us a great opportunity to talk with lots of our fellow Americans. Since many civic-minded constituents and community leaders in districts will focus on campaigns, go where they are. You can meet interesting and active people at these events, including local elected officials. Mingle, strike up a conversation, and ask for business cards from people you want to follow up with. Look for people who may be useful in reaching your current or possible future member of Congress. Find out their interests and level of concern about climate change, and a bit about who they are, and then gradually introduce CCL and the goals into the conversation. As always, tailor your interaction to where they are. Someone who's already alarmed about climate change may be ready to quickly dive into a solution often via legislation. But in many cases, the best course is to just start a conversation by asking them their views and concerns and build a relationship so that you can have a true dialogue. Always ask for their business card or contact information so you can take the invite and so you can take the initiative in following up with them. So bring your own business cards so you can share with them, and always make sure that if you can get their contact information, do it, because it always works better when you're the one who can initiate the follow-up. Debates and forums, picnics, parades, and party conventions are all places where you can mingle and start relationships. Some of these events will encompass both parties, or some will be held by just one party. Ideally, left of center volunteers will attend Democratic events, while right of center volunteers will attend Republican events. If you attend any event, especially fundraisers, as a supporter of a particular candidate, remember that you are there as an individual who is concerned about climate change, not as a representative of your CCL chapter. Your CCL chapter cannot pay for you to attend a fundraiser for a candidate for obvious reasons. We don't want to see as though we're supporting one candidate over another. Now, again, with the virus, this is going to be a little different, so we probably won't have as many opportunities for this, but nevertheless, the virus won't be here forever, and it is a long campaign season. So keep these tips in mind as we move through the 2020 campaign season. And with that, I'll throw it over to Adeline, who is kind enough to take a break from her master's thesis to join us this evening.
All right, thank you so much, Don. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into the 2020 Senate and House candidate guidelines. So the short story, this year when it comes to candidates, less is better. So the political landscape on climate change has changed completely from the last presidential election. Climate change is a top tier issue in 2020. It used to be very hard to get candidates to talk about climate change, and that is completely different now in both parties. Democrats are arguing with each other over who has the strongest plan, and many Republicans are finding that they need to start proposing meaningful solutions. In addition to this, we are functioning in a highly polarized political climate, and things that we've done in the past might not work for us the same way they have in previous election years. So we are also steering away from asking candidates to support HR 763. If Democrats make it a campaign priority, they will be pulled to use it as a wedge against their opponents, which will make it harder after the election to build bipartisan support for the bill. Republicans are unlikely to support it publicly because they don't yet see enough support in their own party to make it something they would want to campaign on, and they may perceive it as safer to publicly oppose it. So this election season, we aren't suggesting going to candidates, including presidential candidates, to start educating them on the bill. Instead, when you interact with them, you can encourage them toward general support for carbon pricing and or market-based solutions, and toward working across the aisle so that something can actually get passed. You can tell candidates why you are concerned, so personal stories about how climate change is impacting you, people you love, or your community, and how much you want them to commit to real solutions to the problem. Once the election is over, you'll get back into continuing to educate the winners on the specifics of our bill. So the same advice applies to asking questions at town halls or forums. We want candidates, especially on the right, to know that the public and members of their party want action on climate. Phrase your question in the language of their party and make sure to appeal and educate the audience. So for example, you might talk about risk management when you're talking to Republican audiences. As above, share a bit of your personal story and ask them to commit to enacting solutions to the problem. And also plan for the future. Candidates need to make themselves known to voters, so you can learn a lot about them. Make notes on their personal stories, biggest issues, biggest supporters, and who they are trying to appeal to as they campaign. You need to know what is important to your future member of Congress, and they are busy communicating that in many ways throughout the campaign. So you can start cultivating their trusted people as you find out who they are. So I'm going to throw it on back to you, Don.
Awesome, thanks, Adeline. I want to chat just a minute about our additional resources. You can read more tips on getting the most out of town halls or candidate forums in our trainings on attending town halls and candidate forums. We try and make it easy around here. Getting ideas for questions to ask, we have a list of sample town hall questions, or you can visit our statewide forums to see and discuss what others have shared during their town halls. You can also check out our Communicating with Conservatives training page, which is something I think we could all get more practice on. And of course, our laser talk on bipartisanship, which is obviously super important in times like this. And I'm gonna toss it back over to Adeline.
Great. So now we're going to be talking about bipartisanship, one of our cornerstones of CCL. So staying nonpartisan and bipartisan in the campaign season. So whatever you choose to do during election season, remember always that CCL is both nonpartisan, as in we do not engage in partisan politics or endorse candidates, and we're also bipartisan. We work with people from both of the major parties. So if candidates ask to speak at your meetings, you can politely explain that we can't give preference to or support any one candidate. Whatever activities your group engages in should be even-handed toward all candidates. If you have any questions about what events to attend or what your ask should be, please reach out to your regional coordinator or to CCL staff. So Citizens Climate Lobby is a nonpartisan organization. As I've said, during electoral campaigns, we have the opportunity to connect with individual candidates on the issue of climate change while being clear that we do not support or organize for individual candidates or political parties. We work to build political will for the livable world, and our preferred policy recommendation is a revenue-neutral carbon fee and dividend plan. We know that only by securing support from a significant number of elected officials from both of the major parties will our plan actually become law. So in the context of an election, parties and candidates like to draw distinctions, and they may seek to use climate as an issue, the climate issue as a way to disadvantage their rivals. So our role is not to help them do this. It is to demonstrate support for climate action and carbon pricing from voters, and perhaps especially to the Republican candidates. As individuals, you are of course encouraged to participate in our democracy and our elections in absolutely whatever way you like. However, if you are widely seen as a CCL leader in the community, you might want to consider how your individual activities, including on social media, will impact how you and CCL are seen. People may not be able to distinguish your partisan work from your nonpartisan role in CCL. And whenever we are wearing our CCL hats, we need to act in ways that are consistent with our goals and values. We need to act during campaign season in ways that leave us well positioned to work with whomever wins the election.
Awesome. Thanks, Adeline. So I get the pleasure of introducing a brand new activity for us, and this is voter registration. So we like to say that democracy is our solution to climate change. So promoting participation in our democracy fits well within our mission. We encourage you to add voter registration information to your CCL tables and grassroots outreach, and are developing resources to help you do that. Be aware the registration requirements vary from state to state, and this is not an area where CCL has expertise. We strongly recommend partnering with a local or national nonpartisan voter registration group if you are interested in adding voter registration to your grassroots outreach. It's important not to accidentally break any local election laws. As we said, this varies quite a bit by state to state, so please do your research before you do this. But obviously, engaging in democracy is something we are all about, and we encourage you to support others in engaging as well.
Great. I get to play bad cop and tell you what not to do. So here are some activities to avoid. CCL chapters should not endorse any candidates or participate in partisan campaign activities or events. CCL chapter meetings should not be used to spread campaign materials or advocate for candidates or provide a platform for a candidate to speak. CCL chapters should not attack candidates. They may become your future members of Congress, and they are likely to remain community leaders regardless. And it's also just not consistent with our core values. In previous years, when it was hard to get climate change discussed as an election issue, we suggested some activities to focus on climate change. But with the prominence of the issue this year and deep polarization, we think your time is better spent on our core activities. So specifically, we don't recommend organizing your own candidate forum on climate change or trying to insert climate change legislation into party platforms. Instead, focus on outreach, community education, and town halls instead. All right, so another fun topic, what to do if one of our CCL chapter members is running for office. So even in this case, CCL cannot endorse a specific candidate, but volunteers as individuals not associating themselves with CCL are of course free to help in any way that they wish. So if you have a CCL volunteer running for office locally, then continue to act consistently with CCL's policy of respect, gratitude, and appreciation for public service toward all candidates. Work with them as they step back from CCL if in a leadership role within the CCL group. Supportive chapter volunteers should be mindful of the impact of their visible support in our nonpartisan lobbying. Consult CCL staff and your regional coordinator if you're uncertain about particular activities. Candidates are free to talk about CCL, but not to claim that they are endorsed by CCL. And CCL welcomes all candidates as volunteers and/or supporters. So we're at a really exciting time for CCL, and we're really only here because of your dedication and advocacy. So please reach out to your state or regional coordinator with any questions you may have as we build the political will for a livable world during this election season 2020.
Thanks so much. I entirely agree. I think that the other trainings that CCL community has available, especially on how to attend town hall meetings and form your own questions, especially on the local or the national level, tying in impacts, whether it's local economy impacts, national economy impacts, and also the stories that many of our groups have shared. I know that we have the examples from Utah and the wonderful work building a bipartisan state level coalition there, as well as chapters that have shared what's worked well from them in Columbia, South Carolina, to Barton Springs in the Austin area of Texas, to some of our work being done with state level legislators in California and Illinois. If you're curious about more of these stories after listening in tonight, feel free to go to the training page highlighted in the call notes and check those out for further in-depth interviews. All right, so with that, let's wrap up tonight. We want to thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions, here are the contact places where you can find both how to reach out to myself, Dawn, or Adeline. Our emails are listed here, as well as visiting our forums on community.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.